Hello SGD, Sacred Geometry Decoded, and this video I'm going to call it the geometry of growth and healing, and I'll be using the Fibonacci sequence to show how this very simple, very lovely geometry has very important aspects just beyond, far beyond man-made architecture. The reason why it's so loved by the architects of the past is because it is built into nature itself, and alternative title could be Geometry Heal Thyself. So let's look at a okay, so a shell, this is one expression of this particular type of geometry, and it's got to do with the spirals and how things grow. This would be another example, and emerging. Now I'm using the Fibonacci sequence because that is the best way to do it, but it's not exclusive, so I'll explain that in a moment, because it's not the Fibonacci sequence that's important, it's the way that the Fibonacci grows. 1 plus 1 equals 2, 1 plus 2 equals 3, 2 plus 3 equals 5. It grows by, just like a shell, it grows by the largest edge is the factor of growth, which leads to the next one. So shells are one example. Sunflowers is another example of this system of growth, and also healing. Now here's a pine cone. Okay, get that in focus so you can see the Fibonacci spiral that we'll be drawing in a moment. Here's another pine cone. And so these are examples of when things work well in nature, but the beauty of this system is that it's healing. This geometry will heal itself, and that's why it's so important, why things grow like this in nature. So we have a Fibonacci spiral, and we'll draw this first. So let's assume everything's working great. Now there's a few lovely things about the Fibonacci, and so all I've done is just to draw a simple grid, just so I don't have to spend time drawing lines as I go along. So it's just a series of squares. And so imagine now this pine cone starts to grow, and it grows from its first initial cell. And so all we do is we set so the first, let's call it the first cell grows. And I'll just mark it so this is our origin point. Would that actually? Sorry, I'll call this the origin point. This is where the miracle of life begins, let's say. And so now it's going to grow by its largest factor. So actually, imagine a circle here. This is the first cell, and it's going to grow by its largest edge. And so we set the compass there, and we draw a 1/4 circle. Okay. Ooh. Let me get that. Probably because I just used a ruler to draw this grid, and the thickness of the pencil, I didn't line it up, but you can get the point where I'm. So this is our first growth. We've grown from 1. And now we've grown with a 1/4 circle, and now we're at 1, 1, 1, 1, the Fibonacci. And so now we just repeat that rule that we're going to grow, because both is 1 and 1, we're going to grow by its largest edge. And so we just do now another 1/4 circle. And so now we have 1 by 2. And so now it forms the largest edge. We adjust the compass again, and all we do now is add another 1/4 circle. Anyway, there we go. So now we began at 1, 1, now we're at 1, 2, now we're at 2 by 3. Fibonacci, the factor of growth is the largest edge. So now that would be the corner of the rectangle we've created is a 2 by 3. set the compass again to the largest edge, and we draw another quarter circle. And so now we're at 5 by 3, 5 by 3, and we repeat. And so now that's the rectangle. We just go to that. We just keep growing and growing by the largest size of the largest edge. That's the factor of growth. And now we draw another quarter circle. And so now I have 5 by 8. That's a quarter circle, that's a quarter circle, that's a quarter circle, another quarter and another quarter. These are just quarter circles, but we can already start to see that this rate of expansion of growth gives the illusion of a smooth spiral, but it's not. It's the illusion of a smooth spiral. And so that's exactly how sunflowers, pine cones, and shells grow. You can even see, we've got this is how things grow, and why they grow in this way, because you just grow by the largest factor. You don't. It's less chance of mistakes happening. Now I'll pause here and I'll run a spreadsheet just to show you the maths of this and compare. But it's not just the Fibonacci sequence, it's the Lucas numbers, or any random sequence that just grows by this factor will always come back to, or will keep on approaching phi, or the golden number, which is 1.61803398887, and on it goes. That's the golden number. And this spiral, any sequence that grows just by adding the largest to, 1 plus 1 equals 2, 1 plus 2 equals 3, they will all find their way closer and closer to the golden number. But this is neatly expressed that everything is working well. But what happens in nature is that nature doesn't work like that. There's all sorts of factors come in, and now this pine cone is not, things haven't worked perfectly, and what we have is this, this is what happens in nature. Things don't always work out as we intended. However, this geometry of the spiral growing at this ratio actually leads to things healing themselves. So this deformation, it will actually repair itself just because it follows the same rules of growth. And this is how this geometry is about growth, but it's also about healing. And so, okay, now I'll do this on a spreadsheet just to show you the math of it, and how, if everything runs perfect, we come to the golden number by Fibonacci, Lucas, or by any random two numbers we start with. If we just expand them and grow at that same ratio, we'll always be coming back to this beautiful number. One of the reasons why this is a beautiful number is phi plus 1 equals 2.618033 dot. Phi squared equals 2.618033, etc. 1 over phi, 1 divided by the golden number, equals 0.618033, etc., which is phi minus 1. Only this number and only this number has these properties. In the infinite sea of numbers, only this golden number, and that's why it's called the golden ratio, has these types of properties. That's why it's so beautiful. Let's do the spreadsheet, and then we'll look at healing. Okay, so we've drawn the spiral, but let's look at it at the numbers regarding to that. So we have the Fibonacci, Lucas, and a random series. And so I'll begin with the Fibonacci, where we have 1 and 1. And then to grow the Fibonacci, it's just 1 plus 1 equals 2. Now on a spreadsheet, you can just hit equals, and then we plus, and then plus equals. So now we have
1, 1, 2, and then you can just drag it down, and there we have the Fibonacci numbers. But what we want to look at is the ratio between those, and so now I'm going to hit equals, and then I'm going to hit the second Fibonacci and then divide it by the previous one. Okay, and now if we drag that down, you can see that the ratio between the Fibonacci numbers starts off, but very, very quickly it comes to 1.6180,328. Now if I was to carry that down, it's going to get ever more and more. It'll never quite hit, but it's just the further you go, the closer and closer you get until you're a 1 million decimal place, like 0.000001 from there. And so that's why the Fibonacci ratio and the Fibonacci numbers are connected to the golden ratio. Now another important set of numbers which is very beautifully connected to the Fibonacci is the Lucas numbers, but just for the moment we're going to use that same ratio of growth, but instead of beginning 1, 1, the Lucas numbers would be 1, 3. And then we can just, the rate of growth is the same. It's the same as works with the Fibonacci. So we just add the previous two, and now we get 1, 3, 4. If we drag that down, we get the Lucas numbers. 1, 3, 4, 7, and 11. That's a nice connection with the Great Pyramids, the Great Pyramid. But that's the Lucas series. The Lucas series grows at exactly the same rate as the Fibonacci, and if we follow that same rule, we divide one Lucas number by the previous one, and then so Fibonacci begins at 1, Lucas numbers begins at 3, but if we drag that down, the same thing happens again. It just, the further and further you go, the closer it gets to 1.618033987. The numbers are not important, it's the way that they grow, where we just add the previous one. So just like a sunflower or a shell or a pine cone, it grows by the previous edge. Now let's do a random sequence. So I'll begin with 1, and the random number now would be 1,258. So let's even go really big. Now we're going to do the same thing again. You hit the equals, and then we add the previous two, and so 1 plus 1,258 is 1,259, and we're going to grow, and you'll see that those numbers get very big very quickly. But if we follow that same rule of the golden ratio, we divide the larger one by the previous number, and well, that begins at 1,258, the ratio between them, but very, very quickly that emerges and gets closer and closer to the golden ratio, 1.61804, and again we'll extend it out, 0.371. It's the rate of growth that's important, not the Fibonacci sequence, not the Lucas sequence, not the random sequence. And so that's how the golden ratio is so important in the way that things grow. And you just grow by your largest edge. And so that's the golden ratio.
Okay, golden number,
if everything works,
Fibonacci, Lucas,
perfect.
Random numbers, all coming back towards this beautiful number, and quarter circles creating the illusion of a spiral. It grows at just the right proportion that it looks correct as well. So that's, but now if we come back to this pine cone as example, something's happened. This pine cone hasn't grown yet. It still works. It's still viable in nature. It's still a living thing with potential because the geometry has healed itself. Okay, so we take this one away, and I haven't thought this one through, so I'm going to begin just with those rules again. Again, this grid's a little bit out, but we'll begin with, we'll be using again the Fibonacci numbers, 1, 1, 2, 3, and then at that point so we'll just grow another Fibonacci spiral, and we'll start here. So again, 1/4 of a circle. Then we grow by the largest edge, which is just, again, it's another, we don't need to change the compass this time. Okay, so now we have a 1, we started with 1, 1, now we have 1, 2, and now we find, just expand again, we grow by the largest edge, and now we have the beginnings of that spiral again, quarter, circle, quarter, the illusion of a spiral. But now something's happened, nature's interfered, and this perfect, something's gone wrong. So I'll freehand this, and whether I'll go bigger or smaller. Okay, so instead of growing now, okay, how would I think of it? Okay, so now something's happened, and instead of growing like that, there's been a fire, a bad year, drought or something, and it's affected the growth rate and has either exaggerated or stunted it. So let's imagine now that this growth has been stunted. So we don't have that nice circle. We have this thing which now looks, you know, it doesn't fit the spiral now. It hasn't grown in the way it should. However, now things come back to normal for a moment. Now the drought is gone, and now the growth can go back to its original form. And so we set the compass again, and we just do 1/4 circle. And I wish I had started at the top there. And so now we could expand it again, and we just do the 1/4 circle. It's going to run out of paper, but now the spiral has healed itself. Even if something goes wrong, so it grows too little, or if it grows too much, so alternatively, there's been, you know, some rogue particle has come and hit the DNA of the plant, and it's affected it now, and it's exaggerated the growth. And so now we see again this spiral doesn't look, you know, it's lost the appearance of the ideal spiral. But if again we just follow that rule now, and we grow by 1, and then if we were to go 1 again, the spiral has healed itself. That's why this rate of growth, so for instance, what would that be? That'd be 1, 2, 3, 3 and a bit. So the next number would be 3.25, and so the next would be 6.25. Then we add those again, and we have 9.5. Add those, and we get 15.75, and then 25.25. So things have happened and changed. But if we apply this sequence again, and that's now I'll do a spreadsheet to show what happens, but even though these should be coming closer and closer to 1.618 the further you get. So for instance, 2 divided by 1 is 2, 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. In your Fibonacci sequence, 1, 1, 2, so 3 divided by 2 is 1.5, 5 divided by 3 is that 1.6, and then, well, it's going to get closer and closer to the golden number if everything runs well. However, sometimes things happen, and nature, using this growth rate, the Fibonacci is a lovely way of looking at it. Fibonacci can be found in pine cones, sunflowers, etc. But, well, something's happened and it's changed, but what's going to, even though there's been this, something's happened bad, the numbers themselves will then come back to the golden ratio. Now I'll put that into I'll show that on a spreadsheet, and I'll use these particular set of numbers to show that whatever happens is, as long as you keep growing even if something goes wrong, as long as you just keep growing at this, in this sequence, doesn't matter whether it's Fibonacci, Lucas, or a random set of numbers as I've just provided there, they're always going to come back to a ratio of 1.618. And the spiral, the plant, the shell, the pine cone is going to heal itself. And that's why, that's the beauty of this geometry. So when everything's running nice, you know, you get beautiful shells, you get beautiful sunflowers, you get beautiful pine cones, pineapples. Yeah, you know, it's just everywhere. And but even proportions of, especially in the human body, the amount of the golden ratio in the human body is, especially 5 fingers, but I have 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But then you have, so 1, 2, 3, and then we have 5. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. But even with your fingers, there, each finger is made up of 1, 2, 3. So even when you break down the finger, you get 3. That's just one expression of the Fibonacci, or really the golden ratio, in the human form. But okay, I'll do the spreadsheet and I'll show you how even when things go wrong in nature, by following this very simple mathematical geometric pattern, the geometry can heal itself.
Okay, so
not
that
only about
spiral
growth,
I just
it's
drew,
also about
we drew
healing.
2 variations. I'm going to look at the one where we had, let's call it a drought, and so it was a bad year of growth and it didn't grow as it should. And so it began with a Fibonacci sequence, 1 and 1. And so let's do the Fibonacci. So we just hit the equal sign to make an equation, and then we just add the previous 2 values, and then we drag it down. We only need to go 1 because it grew 1, 1, 2, 3, but the next year was 3.25, and so I'm going to hit equals and then add the previous 2 values. And so now instead of growing, as here in the Fibonacci, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, something happened along the way and it changed. So now we can just, then there was this bad year here, I'll highlight that, but then we can drag it down, and so there are those, that's how it would have kept on growing after that point, again if there was no bad year. But there we see where it's highlighted, there was, take away that. But what's important is, again, the ratio between those, and so divide Fibonacci, or the growth, by its previous, and up to that point it grows 1 to 1.5 ratio, so just like here in these Fibonacci's, and it should, if everything had gone well, it would have carried on the same. However, then we had this bad year, and so we can just drag that down, and now you can see it's gone backwards. So it should have been 1.6666 here, but something's come along and interfered. However, at that point it heals itself, and just by following that same growth pattern, so whether it's Fibonacci, Lucas, a random set, or this set we've drawn, it will return to the golden ratio the further we extend it down. I've extended that cell, but anyway, you get there. And you can see, you just extend it down, and at 1.618033. Not only is it a beautiful rate of growth, that those quarter circles give the appearance of a spiral, but if, as things happen in nature, they don't always work out perfect, but yet the imperfection will always deliver perfection. It will, the geometry of growth through the example sunflowers, shells, pine cones, will return us to this most beautiful of number, the golden ratio, which is in the infinite sea of numbers, has values which are just perfect. The divine ratio is another name for it, because phi plus 1 equals phi squared, 1 divided by phi equals phi minus 1, and so many other aspects to it. That's just a very short list of the beauty of the golden ratio. So spirals, growth, geometry, the reason for the its incorporation into sacred and ancient and modern architecture, because it's still happening now. I.M. Pei passed away earlier this year or late last year, made the Louvre Pyramid, one of those rock star architects. Well, reluctantly he spoke on the golden ratio and said it was the most important thing that he'd learned. Other architects still use it, incorporate it all the time. I'll put a link to a series called There's Something About Phi, great series, and he just goes through other examples of how important the golden ratio is, and one of those things hidden in plain sight in the architecture, but also the architecture of nature itself, because it's not just a beautiful system, it's a system that repairs, and that's why nature can heal itself, or at least one of the reasons. It is the golden ratio. SGD, Sacred Geometry Decoded. Cheers and have a good one. Geometry.